go in and do engineering work, you can go in here and then create a system and then verify the system, simulate it, and then see how it works, and then go and then build it. So I made this for people who are interviewing and want to learn more about system designs or system architecture, or anyone want to build, like, they have a startup coming up, they want to build an architecture and verify how it works. You can go in here and then can build it real fast, simulate it, and then see how it works, and then go and build it. For example, I have, let's say this system design for URL shortener. You can go in here and then see how it works. We have components here. We all know how URL shortener works. You have a long URL, you send a request, like a post request, and then you have an API service which converts it into a short URL, and you save that into database. So similar case, you can go in here, add the components. I have an HTTP components here and here. You go in here, you create your design. Like, say you want to do like a post request for shorten. You do your post request, add your API service, and then you add your code in here. So once you have your code in here and add your service, you can then simulate the request and then see how it works before you even go in and create your own system. So I wanted to create this for like a very fast way to validate how your system works. So I can do a very quick test for this. I have this URL right here, and I want to run the request, a post request to shorten this. So once I hit run for this, the request will be sent to the API service, and then we're going to execute this code, and then save that code into database. Yeah, so it's kind of like LeetCode and Miro in one application. Like, you can text your code in LeetCode and see how your code works, or even text your code in a compiler or anything. But there isn't really a tool for system designs of how to like see how it works. So I made this just for that case. So you can even create complex systems. Like, let's say you want to create a system like LinkedIn. So I made this LinkedIn system where you want to create like a platform like LinkedIn. You have your different post requests, different HTTP requests right here. Your load balancer will then route to the right API service. And then we have different message queue, which will also execute in the background. So it's a way to simulate your system architecture without having to do much work. Just come in here, do it, simulate it, and then see how it works, and then go and build it. So if you want to try it out, it's free to try it out. It's robustdesign.io. You go in here and then you can create a system easily without having to go to AWS or anything. I also have templates here that you can also try it out if you want to see how different templates works. Yeah, so I wanted to present this and get some feedback or any interest if anyone is interested in it or anyone wants to try it out. Yeah.
Can you show like the run? So there's like a run button.
Oh yeah.
One of them, and like show us how to like follow the output.
So I'm gonna send a run request, and then this should then give the output in here. So I'm just run this. So we send a run request for the post for shorten, and then that will save into database, and then we have the ID to be generated right here. So that's the ID that was converted into a short URL. I can then take this and then make a GET request for this in here. Paste that in here, and then that should return back my long URL. So I need to just connect this request into database, into the API service. Yes. Oh. Why does one want to connect?
Maybe you need to use the header or some special place for connection.
I have a connection tool here. Well, this is bad for demo. I made a change today. That's what's affecting it. Why isn't it connecting? Come on. I just made a change today. And that's what's affecting it. But what I guess I can show that right now. But you then paste your short URL code I just got, and then that should then return back the long URL, and then it should I guess that's what we do in the system architecture. It'll return back and then redirect it to the long URL. So that's really the idea here. So instead of you want to learn how want to recreate LinkedIn, you can also come in here and then create like a create post, create user, update profile, have that request, and then have a service which then process your request and then save into database, or even do more service after that. Which I have an example right here. For example, when I like a post, when I comment, then that gets routed into the API gateway, which will then find the right path for it, and then route it to the API service. And then you can also attach message queue to it, which also then do more processing after that. So you could do a lot with this if you want to do some testing or create some complex systems before you go out and even create it. Yeah. I'm not sure why that bug is happening, but I'll definitely fix that today for sure before I go to bed. Yeah, is there any questions? Yeah.
Well, I guess I was going to say, could you show us the create a new design? Like kind of how you go about creating a new design in here?
A new design? What do you mean?
Yeah, that create a new design button up there.
Oh, yeah.
Just build a whole new one.
Develop connections. What's his name?
It's a new design, and then you can add designs to it, and then
Is that a neat?
Oh, gotcha. I see that. That's cool.
yeah, API service can add your code to it, and then you can add your own custom code. Yeah, I have instructions of how to like insert, do select from backend, or even update your backend process, backend data. You can also attach it to message queue to send data to message queue. So for the message queue, I have two options, which is we can process it immediately when the API service gets the code, or you can pass data to it and then process it and then send that into the consumers attached to it. So you could do a lot with this. Also, if you want to do a request to an external API, I also have that option here. And you can attach an external API here and then send a request to external API if you want to do that too. And then load balancer for path routing, or if you want to do round robin balancing, you could do that too here. Yes, I guess this is more like the MVP to test it out, to get feedback, to validate the product before I even like go on and improving it even more. So I'm to get feedback here of any interest about it.
Can you talk about what you used to build it?
I use Next.js React for the front end, and then right now I'm using Python Flask. For the code execution, I'm using Just Zero. It's a different. So our backend, we call our backend to simulate it, and then to execute the code, we call in Just Zero, which is hosted in a different place. We execute the code, and then we get the code information back, and then we continue the processing. Yeah. I can also do a load test on this if you want to do like simulate like 1,000 requests for one HTTP request. You can do a load test, and then after that, see the metrics, how long it took to run it, and all that. Yeah.
questions that downstairs we can pick your brain if you stick around, right?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome, man. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Robust design. Clever name.
Right.
So this presentation is a work in progress. Let me see if I can get this on 2 screens or 1 screen. Give me a second. Great. See if that works. Cool. Okay. Okay. So, like I said, this presentation is a work in progress. The Redux stuff. If you have any critiques about it, I'd love to hear them. So I'm just gonna wing it and see where it goes. But before we get into that Redux stuff, I want to just do a quick year in review about what's happening in the world of React, right? I know this is not a definitive, factual, or maybe overblown exaggeration, right? NPM trends, if you look up React, you kind of get this graph. And the point is, like in this 1 year alone, you can see it just shoot off from like 30 million to like 62 million downloads, right? Which is ridiculous. And that's kind of like the AI being trained and the AI just spitting out a bunch of React, right? Which is, I don't know if it's genius or not, but it is what it is. And so the point is, React is here to stay. It's not going to go away anytime soon. I started back in over here. That's where I started programming, was React, when I lived in Boston. And at the time I was working with Angular, and I realized when I started playing with React that it's fucking awesome compared to Angular. And so I stuck with it. Came to Austin in 2016 and started the meetup. So a lot has happened during that time. Year in review, right? Did everyone update their packages? Yeah. Those are pretty bad, kind of embarrassing, but nonetheless, with 62 million downloads, right? You're pretty popular, so there's no doubt you'll be you have a bigger bullseye in your back, right? And React has reached that level. Anyway, so it's a pretty scary bug, exploit, right? Any remote code execution in any Next.js application right now, if it's not updated, and any of these packages and frameworks, bundlers that have been affected by it, right? Which is pretty scary stuff. Recommendation: use PMPM, right? If you look into the PMPM, why use PMPM for exploits or for package management, you will find examples of how you can prevent being infected by something like this. If that doesn't satisfy you, there was other 2 more CVEs that came out, the day before, after that major one. One of them is a high severity, and the other one is a medium. Either way, update. I guess now it's on 19.02, 03, whatever it is. But I highly recommend for your businesses and just small projects as well, if you're hosting on Netlify or Vercel or any of these other dozens of React, particularly React server components, right? The new stuff.
I don't see like the links on that screen at all.
What links?
I can see them.
Oh, the bottom one?
I cannot see any of them on that. Yeah, it's just contrast.
Oh yeah, the contrast. Yeah. The if you want the CVE 2025.
Yeah, that would be better.
Okay. Yeah, the contract. Yeah. Again, if you want like the slides, I'll give them to the slides, right? There's nothing moving on, right? React goes to the Linux Foundation. I think this was huge. If you read the announcement, right, it's an intent to launch. So we'll see how that goes. It's great stuff. If you're a hater of Meta, and you're always worried about Meta doing something, you can relax now, I suppose. But if you follow like OSS, Linux Foundation stuff, Kubernetes is huge, right? The CNCF, it's under the umbrella of Linux Foundation. It's a really great community, and I hope React goes the same way. It's a massive community, in theory, right? Vendor neutral environment. Do note that any OSS, if you follow like the Kubernetes stuff, there's a lot of or Linux Foundation, you always see these open source projects being funded by or supported by like big companies. Amazon is obviously a big Kubernetes, Microsoft, big Kubernetes. And so seeing them here supporting React makes me feel comfortable and, you know, pretty good. Like React made it, right? React made it to the Linux Foundation, made it to a huge outcome that hopefully it's for the best. But do know, I put this in quote, Meta is committing 5-year partnership with the React Foundation, right? $3 million in funding and dedicated engineering support. Again, it's not going away anytime soon. If you follow Vercel has like 8 core developers for React, right? Stuff like that, and it's all open source. So it's really good. And it also includes React Native as part of that Linux Foundation as well, which is great news. And obviously, AI stuff, right? AI stuff is everywhere. And it's kind of rethinking the role of developer on a day-to-day basis. And so I kind of took a step back. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of, I don't know, like noise to signal what it is. But from my perspective, I just took a snapshot with things that are very important, that are trying to go in that direction that I think is going to impact our skills, our development flows. And the idea is, has anybody played with Google's anti-gravity? No. Check it out. The UI for that is like their own IDE, but the whole point is context, right? AI integration, context, code generation, this whole relationship with AI built into an IDE, which is, I think, where everything's going to go into. So Cursor also is going that direction. They already have their, I guess they just launched a browser, right? Cursor browser with the same thing. Like you can write context, you can write skills, you can write all this stuff. Generating code is just a thing that it does. So the IDEs are becoming more and more centralized around AI, right? Agent skills from Anthropic. Another thing to keep an eye out, Anthropic acquired Bun. Everyone know what Bun is, the runtime, right? It's huge. Why they acquire it, you can read the comments, you can try to read the 8-ball, but you can see that the spin-up time on Bun and the, I guess it's written Zig, right? It's super fast. Of course, if you just eliminate all the history and all the legacy that you have to support, right? Node.js has to support all this history. If you remove all that, you get Bun and rewrite it in Zig, whatever. It's super fast, and it's like sandbox, and you can put it on the edge. And so if you think about it and you look into the horoscopes of this, is Anthropic going to launch an AI agent that actually generates the code, runs it for you, and then returns it back, you know, whatever it is that they're trying to figure out. But something to keep an eye on. Also, yeah, so the agentic development environment, ADE stuff, it's going to be huge. The idea of you're not a pilot anymore, right? The cockpit, the pilot, the airplane is being automated. You as a developer now belong in the control tower. You have to manage the AI agents. You got to manage the airplanes type of thing. I think we're going to see that concept stretched out, continue to be stretched out. Yeah, and so I guess the future of AI assisted, right? The AI isn't going to replace you, but you definitely have to be able to use it, right? To assist whatever it is that you're trying to do. And so if you depending on where you look at, right, combination of humans, LLMs, domain-specific tools, and deep research. And you're going to see a lot of tools popping out around that. New skills to acquire, spec-driven development, verification speed, right? If you are a seasoned developer, this is probably kind of trivial stuff, right? Can you look at code efficiently, spotting problems without reading every single line, right? You take a back seat on writing, now you're a full-time web developer that just reads and checks the work of the AI agent. High-level architectural judgment, right? Another skill set. Context management, another skill set you're just gonna have to learn, part of the job going forward. To such an extent, if anybody uses JetBrains in the crowd, so JetBrains is a massive effing IDE. They were working on a lightweight, I think it's called Fleet IDE, and they kind of just like pivoted. They didn't cancel it or stop making it, because that's not what the words they used. But anyways, I think the CEO or CTO kind of came up with this quote, right? So this massive company, JetBrains, that has done their IDE since the beginning of the internet, kind of is pivoting as well into this whole agent development environment flow, right? They're looking to the tea leaves and they're like, nope, IDE as we know it is no longer going to be the same. So keep an eye on that. And the churn is real, right? If you think keeping up with React versions is a pain, well, keeping up with AI churn is also going to be a pain. Anyway, that's kind of like a year in review. Yeah, if you have any more of that conversations, comments, we can talk about it downstairs while we bike shed. Yeah, so today's talk, I really want to get into like Redux sucks. I'm going to zip right through it though. It's a lot. And just a quick back, why Redux? I started working on a project, which I'll introduce later. And I started, well, vibe coding. I guess at that time, Claude just picked Zeuslen as my management out of, I typed in, like I prompted recommendations, whatever state management library you recommend, go with it, and it picked that out. So I went with it for a while. And then I realized that I was just making another Redux, and I'll walk you through that. Anyways, it was an awakening. I hated it. It sucked. I was so pissed off that I wrote this talk. And this was like 2 months ago, 2.5 months ago. And so there's going to be a lot of anger in my slides. But at the end of the day, like AI helped a lot, but it also like killed my mojo. Anyway, so what we're going to cover, we're going to just go through what state management is, common packages, right? Redux, Zeuslen. I'm going to introduce a project. We're going to talk about Redux, and then we're going to go through some implementation. And so the theme of the night is like, you have to be this high to ride the roller coaster. And it's because state management is fucking hard. It is fucking hard. And we're not talking about websites. We're talking about fucking an application, right? And it always comes down to like, well, what is state, right? Have you ever been into those project meetings with your developers or your project managers and trying to figure out what should be in the component, what should be in the store, what should be in the URL state, right? And it seems like everyone has their own mental definition of what state is, so they just get it on the same page. State is any piece of info that can change the artifacts and the effects that the user sees or can do, right? Think about dynamic rendering, dynamic interactions of the user, very JavaScript heavy type of things, filters, select tabs, paginations, authentication, contents in the form, data loading from APIs, right? Notifications, toasts, errors, logging, and of course the URL, right? The URL is considered state. You can store state in the queries of the URL, right? Anything that changes the value of the UI it's under the umbrella of a state. Now, what is state management then? This is where the hard part is. So you can categorize it as the state has to live somewhere, right? How is it going to change? When things happen, how is it going to change? How is it going to flow, right? The data flow that through your app. And how to keep it predictable. This is the most, I think the most important thing here is how do you keep this thing predictable, deterministic? This will save you a lot of headaches if you don't keep an eye on this, depending if you, on what package you use or you roll your own. It is a mistake to roll your own, but just letting you know, having a predictable state management system is not easy. I've tried many times to create my own. Those damn events, the event-driven DOM, JavaScript, whatever it is not friendly. And so obviously handling asynchronous work and errors without race conditions is also something that requires you to be this high to ride. So this is kind of state management, just to level set what I mean and what I talk about when I say state management, right? It's not easy. This shit is not easy, and I don't know how people learn it in boot camp. I don't know how. It's just, I'm seasoned. I'm almost like over a decade, and I'm still getting lost in this state management shit. So 2 common packages that I'll talk about tonight. I started off with comparing 3 after AI told me to go with Zeusland. And just, again, NPM trends, right? Little thing. Redux has been around since the very beginning. So that's what I know most. But I also remember the scars, and I still have those scars left. So I was more than happy to try out Zeusland, right? And just to give you a set of like the popularity with this stuff, again, AI, I'm sure inflates these numbers just because it's so easy to train on. But anyways, so the comparisons between the Zeusland and Redux, when I went back to refactor things, were it's very similar, and that's why I felt very comfortable using Zeusland, right? You have this concept of events, you have a store update, and then the UI reacts. Yay, right? The UI displays the changing data, right? Both have a centralized global store, right, which is great. That's what you want. And you have action-based state changes. Great. So learning Zeusland shouldn't take that. Shouldn't be a complete migration from Redux. Cool. But the architecture is different and the API is different, right? Obviously, the syntax is going to be different. Redux stores, reducers, actions. Zeusland, you have a store function, then you have hooks. Very simple. Some more differences here. Redux, if you go through the documentation, right, predictable state container. And like I mentioned, think about state management, you want predictability. This is something that you want. Before React came out, Angular had this bi-directional updating, right? 2 ways to update a dynamic variable, which will always get out of sync. React comes out, Redux comes out, and it's unidirectional. There's only one way to do it, and this is the way you're going to do it. Hence, predictable state container. They also throw in something called immutable state tree and the concept of action and reducers, right? So they came out and they're like, okay, immutable. Developers don't know what the hell they're doing. We're going to make the state immutable. And the only way to change data is going to be through action and reducers, right? Oh, guess what? It's the Flux semantics architecture. If you don't know what Flux is, it's very early on, I guess came out of Meta as well, before Redux kind of took the best parts and went with it. Anyways, the core here is single source of truth. Obviously, state is read only. You want to update it, you got to go through the actions, right? There's only one door to change state. Again, it's preventing foot guns. And all the changes happen through pure functions, right, which they call reducers. Zeusland is the same thing. You have a global store in a simple API, a very simple API. It's quite the opposite, where it's unopinionated, right? Redux is based off the Flux architecture, whereas Zusland is like, no, you can do whatever you want to do, right? More permissive, right? But with a lot of freedom comes a lot of responsibility. And this is kind of like where the face palm hit me, where Redux is an architecture and Zusland is already, tiny primitive that you can architect yourself. State management, you have to be this tall to do it. If you're architecting yourself a state management system, good luck. Seriously, it is bloody hard. If you're working in a team and you're using Zusland and you build your own architect, you have to distribute that knowledge across your team. So everyone has to use it in a certain way, follow conventions, so on and so forth, documentation, and hopefully someone's not subscribing it to such an extent where it kind of burns somebody's cell phone, burns their pocket running your application, right? So again, the state management, where does state live, how it changes, how does data flow through the app, and how you keep it predictable. So this goes through one by one. Where does state live? Redux, obviously there's a crate store object, one big immutable tree, and you access it via selectors, right? Very simple. Zusland, a reason why I like it a lot is just a JavaScript object. Sometimes you just want to put on the very top of your web page, of your script tags, is just a massive JavaScript object. That's all you want. I don't care about anything else. You just want an object, and then you realize you need more stuff. But anyways, Zusland is really cool because it does this, right? It's just very, very JavaScript, aware, friendly. You can get up and running really fast because it's very just JavaScript, right? It's just an object that you slap on, and you can create as many stores as you want, right? There's no, again, it's unopinionated. It's follow the same rules. It's a bag of state, whatever that is. You have modules, right? And then most importantly, it uses the lingo of React, which is hooks. Everything's hooks. How does it change? Well, you dispatch an action for Redux. Reducers are pure functions. Side effects and everything live in middleware, right? So you get to see the architecture coming out, right? The dispatch an action, reducers compute a new immutable state. In the store replaces the old one, right? Architecture. This huge process for state management. Whereas Zusland, you got to build the architecture yourself. It gives you the primitives to do that, and it's pretty easy, right? Problem is, I feel like the immutability thing is super important. You want immutable state, right? Here in Zusland, they're unopinionated about it. You can implement it yourself. Hopefully, all your developers who are working on the same project follow that convention, right? It's not going to throw an error. It's not going to tell you that you can't do that. No. You're going to update. You're going to mutate the state. You might want to think about that. It won't do any of that, right? It's unopinionated. How it flows through the application, right? You need, again, very important. Unidirectional flow. The action, the middleware, the reducers, and then the store, right? It's very deliberate, right? It's an architecture that you just have to buy into it. Components never pull the state out of thin air. They always subscribe to it, right? I guess another thing too is subscriptions. You're going to see the same thing in Zusland, where you subscribe to it via the hooks, right? But again, in a very similar way, without all the boilerplate or all the, here I say ceremony, but it's the same thing, right? You still need to have, you still need to put the pieces together for Zusland to work with your application. It's very similar. You call an action sets some state in the store, notifications. So at a 30,000 feet high kind of view. They look very similar, but it's the implementation details that come back at you that kind of suck. In either way, right? State management fucking sucks. It's hard. Yeah, components call the store updates, subscribe components, re-render with new state, blah, blah, right? It's very similar to the thing. But is it predictable? Well, if you look at the Redux docs, it's always been predictable. It's always, that's why Redux was born, because it was meant, right? It was built into it, into the design of it. Again, you're buying the architecture. There's no opinions about it. Oh, sorry, there's a very strong opinion about it. You want to use it, you have to buy into it. You can't eject out of it. Zeusland, on the other hand, yeah, there's predictability, but you got to build into it. You got to build that stuff into it, right? Again, you need to have the discipline to do that. Optional immer, right? Immer is the library for immutable. Are you implementing it? Dev tools, are you importing the dev tools method? Are you wiring it up together? Right, Redux out of the box comes with it. Yo, yes.
Are you using Immer? Are you using?
So Redux has Immer, yeah. Yeah, so it's part of the package for Redux. And yeah. Immer? The yeah, it's the immutable library that has its own syntax and vocabulary, but at the end of the day, is you want to use it for anything state. Yeah, so that sounds like the things that was going in my head, and why I was damn mad about either I'm rolling my own Redux using Zeusland, or I can bail out now and just go with Redux. And so that's what I did. And so just to give you an idea of the project I was working on, right? Now that you get a little background of the comparison of the packages, the way of thinking about it, this is the thing that I was working on. This is the thing that kind of gave birth to like, oh, this conflict, which I thought, using AI will solve for me, but no. So I used Cursor. I was trying to do some kind of spec-driven development, right? And then the application, it just got to the point where, you go to sleep, you wake up, go to sleep, and all you did was state, and you're just like, what the hell? Why can this work? Or why is it working differently? So part of that is a quick aside, just to give you an idea of what I was trying to do. Nowadays, these are the models I use with Cursor. The 5.2 just came out not too long ago, so I use the extra high fast, which is extra context window, high reasoning, and on the fast lane to open APIs, whatever it is, right? And it's kind of like the order I go to when I build my products. Gemini Pro came out, it was great until Opus came out, and then it kind of just fell out. So it all depends on like how you prompt and all that stuff, but Gemini has been consistently underperforming compared to Opus and 5.2. Anyways, keep in mind, right, as a vibe coding engineer, there's a lot of power that comes to it. I started the project mid-August into December. I started off with Happy Feet, AI, vibe coding, and it just dropped off because it wasn't all ponies and rainbows. A lot of stuff was vibe coded, but I read and I read every single thing that the AI does. The project started off with minimal code base, and then just blew up, and then every AI that I was using couldn't figure things out. So it was a lesson to be learned. Nowadays, 5.2 came out, and holy shit, I went back into it, as you can see in December. Opus came out, 5.1 came out, 5.2 came out, and I was super excited once again because I was actually throwing it hard fucking problems that I was having. And with one shot, it was just miraculously fixing these damn things that I was completely shocked. So in August, that's when I started paying $200 for Cursor. Not too long ago, I burned out all my credits, and I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna add another credit card to this thing because I am just building shit really fucking fast. Completely amazed at what the model can do with very little context. And yeah.
Have you thought about doing clock instead of cursor?
The cloud code, well, I use a model, but the IDE, I'll be sticking with it for a while. I think things are going to shift, and I don't want to dedicate myself to a particular product yet. But I don't know, man. It's so, I don't know. Today, Cursor, tomorrow, windsurf, then anti-gravity. I don't know. I'm productive now. Just point the model, prompt it, boom. It's fucking amazing, and I'm paying a shit ton of money. Literally, I'm just burning it. It's just, the tokens are expensive, but the code that's generated is bloody amazing, especially given the problems. So here's what am I building? So it's a query management system with AI integrated, first class. Now, I'm not going to talk about how the architecture is set up, the database systems, the API management systems. I'm just going to talk about, the query, what it does, and very, very small components that caused me to shift from Zeusland to Redux, right? And so this thing is a query client. I know there's a data scientist in the crowd, but I do a lot of SQL writing. I do a lot of database management stuff, and I want something like this for a long time. It's not about managing databases. There's nothing here that says anything about database. It's just writing queries. Writing queries is a fucking pain, and it takes a lot of time to grok the domain, right? Understand the tables, how relationships how tables are related to each other. If you have a performance problem, right? How to resolve those type of things. And so this is kind of like app development centric, where you can write these queries, you can write these functions. It's Postgres, and then you can ask the AI to assist. Anyways, part of it, and this is where the Redux clash came to a head, was what I was just trying to model, data model the tab bar of the application, trying to model the query input, the query text, and then here on the right, the directory panel with unsaved queries and saved queries. And it's very simple, right? Here's the use cases for this project. A user can create a new query, which is just a SQL text. They can add and edit a query name. They can add and query a text. The tab bar to select open query editors, right? So it's like an editor. The directory tree, it keeps track of all the queries that you ran or you saved or unsaved. If you ever run into like database clients, usually you just spin up a query or a file, and you just start writing the queries to see what works, what doesn't work, right? You never really save it, I guess, sometimes. And then obviously you want to keep things organized. Create folders, collections, whatever you want to call them, to organize your queries. You're doing an accounts reports, right? You're going to write all your queries in the accounts report. 2025, end of year, finance, right? You're going to write all the queries associated with that topic, right? So having a folders or collections to organize your queries is super important, especially for business intelligence. And so ultimately, at the end of the day, though, this is going to be like a collaborative product, and I wanted to be able to create a link so you can share it with your colleagues. They click on the link, it points to the query that you wrote, so they can see it as well and run it and test it out and stuff like that, right? Very simple on paper. It's very simple, not that long, right? But it really is the devil in the details, right? That's kind of like the project intro, leading into that the query management system, how to do state management. Redux. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Redux. The history of Redux, right? It's been around for a long time. Everyone know who Dan Abramoff is? Yeah. So he no longer is at Meta. I forgot where he went to, but anyways, 2015, I saw this video, this guy talking about time traveling and shit. I'm like, what? State management. He was doing this video and his follow-up comments, whatever, that really got me into Redux. Mid 2016, Mark Erickson. If you haven't heard that name, look him up. This guy is legit. This guy is such a nice guy. He has wonderful documentation that he has done with Redux. Another reason why I stuck with it through the pain, it's just that you can find answers to it. He's super friendly on Reddit. I don't know. This guy is just like, he has no reason to be nice to you, and and React developers tend to be really mean people. But his comments and his way to diffuse situations is something to admire. He comes out in 2018 with the Redux Toolkit. Not officially, you're testing it out, running it. Again, power to Mark to listen to his customers, right? Took whatever Redux pains people are having it, and he wrapped it up in his toolkit. And I think that's what it is nowadays. The official Redux Toolkit is where you want to start off with. Again, 5 years ago, adoption started taking off. React updated their version to, I don't know, was it React 16 something? Yeah, 16, where hooks came in, right? Again, huge impact. Mark listened to the developers, updated it, made Redux fixed on hooks, or no, context, right? And it just ballooned the community growth. And then I guess nothing much, as far as I know, I couldn't find anything online. Has anything really changed since, 3 or 4 years ago? Well, there has been, right? The React server components came out. Redux is still client only. And and I wonder if there's going to be, if Redux can pivot or extend itself to something along the lines of what TanStack is doing to the database store. If you guys heard about TanStack, they're doing a database store. Check that out. It's really interesting thing. But I wonder if Redux can pivot in that direction and actually front both client and server, a little hybrid. That'd be really interesting to see. Anyways, it's been around for a long time, right? And there's a lot of documentation. If there's ever a problem with Redux, you're definitely not alone, and I'm sure there's a solution out there for it. Nonetheless, it is a fucking pain, right? The architecture is one hard to grasp. Images and pictures and bubbles and graphs is easy. In the code base, it is not. It's confusing. I've been doing Redux again for a long time. Took a hiatus, came back to it. I'm still fucking confused with it. Because it's an opinionated architecture. But nonetheless, it's very simple architecture. Right? This is the mental model that you come into it. And then when you get down to the nitty-gritty code is where it all falls. The confusion kind of arises, where you're trying to map the code base to this model and back and forth. Nonetheless, Redux does offer really good primitives. You can build or extend the Flux model. I always struggle with these ideas. I always question their abstractions. Is it the right ones? Anyways, with these primitives, you can pretty much do anything you want to do. Now, before, I guess, Thunks was a thing, or before Thunks became popular, there was this other asynchronous library called Sagas. Anyone remember that? Sagas, Redux Sagas. So I went full all in on Redux Sagas, and I kind of like mastered the Sagas, and then everything associated with asynchronous Sagas, and then no one adopted it, right? The library kind of just sat there, but everyone flipped over to Thunk. And so coming back to Redux, I had to learn about Thunks. Nothing complicated. It was just a different mental model to keep in mind. One thing also that was really fucking confusing was the middleware. And I'll talk about that in a bit. So, okay, so now your architecture, you're understanding it, you're reading the documentations. Okay, cool. I can write componentry with this architecture. Great. Primitives, awesome. Okay, I think I understand the store and the reducers and all this other stuff. And then, oh shit, you know what? RTK, React Toolkit. What the fuck is that? Oh, they offer other primitives, other abstractions on top of the primitives. And this is Mark listening to the community, right? Configuring a Redux store is too complicated. Yes, it is. I remember that. I remember you have to add the dev tool library or the method, and you have to do it in a specific way, and depending on what you're doing. I remember the pain points there, but once you have it done, you can just copy and paste it over and over to your projects. A lot of boilerplate, just a lot of boilerplate. You have to write a lot of code. You have to create a file. You got to write the code in a certain way for all your actions, right? And all your reducers. It has to be follow this input, output, has had all these parameters, is a pain in the butt. And then you had to add a bunch of packages, right? So you wanted immutability. Guess what? You had to add it yourself. Dev tool packages, you got to add it yourself. So I feel like at this point, I felt like Zusland was going through what RTK or Redux was going through in the beginning of its adolescence. Anyway, so you go through it, and what RTK does is kind of abstract primitives. So now you have primitives, and then you have the abstractions over the primitives, and it's all in the name of less boilerplate. And it's true. You can do a lot of stuff with less boilerplate. RTK will generate the code for you. It's great. That's kind of like the theme, right? A lot of things are just generating code for you in the background that you don't have to worry about. Great. And then on top of that, right, TanStack Query is a great library for calling your APIs. Guess what? RTK has one called Query, RTK Query, which also integrates with your Redux store, right? So you can, if you kind of like squint your eyes, you can see why TanStack has their this database store wired up with their TanStack Query, right? It's a common pattern that we'll probably see again and again, where your APIs, obviously the data from your APIs or whatever you're calling, you want to dump it in a store. And so that comes to Thunks. How many have heard about Thunks, learned about Thunks, know about Thunks? Very few. Yeah, it's a function. It could be synchronous, it could be asynchronous, but just think about a function, part of the middleware, which we'll get to in a bit. Confusing, but nonetheless, it's just a function that takes in a couple parameters and you're off to the races. This is where you're supposed to do, and part of the opinionated architecture, you're supposed to use Thunks for your asynchronous workloads. Anything asynchronous goes through your Thunks, right? It doesn't go through the actions. It's not supposed to go through to the reducers. It's always Thunks. So you're gonna make API calls, it goes through Thunks. You're gonna do like read local storage, session storage, any of that stuff, it goes through Thunks. But as you play with Thunks and you want to do everything inside a Thunk, there's a little small print that says, oh, by the way, in a Thunk, you cannot access the URL, right? You cannot access the resource model of the URL. There is no API that says, give me the query parameters in the URL. In my case, I wanted to get the query ID. You couldn't do that in the model. You have to pass the ID or any URL parameter inside the Thunk as an input, or you store the URL parameters as a in the Redux model, and that's what I end up doing, right? So there's limitations with the thunk, nonetheless. Again, opinionated architecture. You can view thunks as coordinators, right? They orchestrate your dispatches, which are your actions into the store. Ultimately, it is able to decide what happens to the UX. And that's what you want to do too, right? There's certain responsibilities, there's certain architecture opinions that you want to adopt or not adopt. And one of them is the last sentence here, thunk after action or before action or before error. So in other words, where does thunk fit in the pipeline or chaining of the middleware, which again is, we'll get to in a bit. Validation, something, again, state management. You have to figure out how you're going to validate your shit, right? I'll talk about it in a bit, but you got to think about, like, do you want to store invalid data in your store? If not, how are you going to validate it? Where are you going to validate it? Where are you going to call your validation functions? And so Redux doesn't provide a very good architecture around that. As far as I know, there's no really, it's not very opinionated about that. It just says, you want to do this, you can do it yourself, right? Do whatever you want to do yourself. So you go online and you're going to find a bunch of patterns on where does validation happen. Should I store it? Should I store invalid user data in my database or in my store or not? And if you do, right, you got to figure out what part of the middleware are you going to put it in. Again, middleware is a huge thing. It's part of the architecture. Again, right, state management is a pain in the ass because there's a lot of things you got to think about. Obviously, you got to think about error handling. You got to think about logging. Are you going to log notifications, your toasts in the store? Are you going to have your logger emits back to your API, to a third-party API? Is that going to belong in a thunk? Is it going to belong in a different piece of the middleware? You got to think about all this stuff because an application, creating an application is not easy, and maintaining the state of an application is not easy. It is a mindfuck. Great, middleware. This is like the thing that just won't start bugging me, right? You look around it, there's a bunch of designs online, a bunch of images, and it's like a pipe. Okay, cool. But everything goes through there. Everything goes through middleware. So your dispatches all the way to the reducers go through this concept of a pipe. It just goes in, right? The pipe is segmented, and you can arrange the things, you can arrange the segments of the pipe, but nonetheless, everything that you do in Redux goes through middleware. So having this idea and understanding middleware is super important in this architecture. If you use something like Zeusland, there's no concept of that. You build it yourself, you decide to make it, you decide to write the code for it. In Redux, you don't have that option. Everything goes through middleware, so you have to figure out how how to build the middleware yourself, or write the segments of the middleware. And another thing too is you hear about middleware everywhere, which is really confusing because you also hear about middleware in the backend, Express, or if you use something like Fastify, or if you use something like you're trying to spin up a Go or Rust backend, right? Like all these libraries and programming languages have their own concept of what a middleware is. Here, it's really fucking weird, at least for me, because everything is middleware. Like you can't live without it. There's no option for it to bail out. But this is your typical architecture. You dispatch something, it goes to your middleware. Your thunk is part of that middleware. Where does the thunk get called? Depends on where you put it in the middleware. And then finally it hits the reducer, which is a pure function. It's not supposed to do any of this stuff. A lot of the recommendations that you'll see about Redux is they're just like recommendations, right? Like, hey, keep your reducers pure. Don't write asynchronous code in the reducers. There's nothing, like Redux is not gonna blow up if you do. They just say don't do it because, it's a foot gun. You have to be this high to ride the Redux train. If you don't know what you're doing, follow the recommendations, right? A lot of the stuff that I did, and hopefully I have time to show it to you, I had to break a lot of these conventions and recommendations that they ask, especially around validation. Because I had my own mental model of how a app should be structured. Redux helped along that way, but it wasn't 100%, so I had to break a couple conventions. That just to say, like, it is this middleware thing, this learning new things, especially in opinionated architecture that has new words, new concepts. It's fucking hard. And then you're learning it and you're also applying it at the same time. It's fucking hard. You're not gonna like it. No doubt, not gonna like it, even for myself, who's been doing front-end development for a decade. Not fun at all. Most importantly, as I was building this thing, I wanted to make my own pipelines. I didn't want to use their middleware. I wanted to use my own because Redux Sagas lets you create your own pipes, channels. You can't do that here. So I was working with a different mental model, trying to use Redux to fit my mental model. Just didn't work, right? Another thing too, when you're building, right, you have to be this high. Seriously, is optimizations. This is like a senior level, senior staff level with a rank of ZZA12, I don't know, like something, because when you think about optimizations of React and Redux working together, it is freaking wild. It is freaking wild. And this is where AI fucking saved my ass many times. Anyways, Redux obviously is built on React. Redux is built on top of React, right? React is completely 100% optimized for prop comparisons, right? You see these massive blog posts that go into the very minute atomic details of how shallow versus deep comparisons, stuff like that, right? Guess what? Redux built on top of that as well. And because there's RTK, it exposes different APIs. You got to be aware, like, okay, if I use this API versus this API, you're going to have a performance impact. Most importantly, another optimization is preloaded state. What that means is that you can preload Redux before the web page even renders. You get a JSON packet, and you're going to shove it into the store, and then the web page is going to render with all your data, right? It's really nifty. It can help with a lot of these flash of content stuff that we get. Anyways, optimizations is a whole different expertise. I ran into it because in the panel, right, the query management panel, I was pretty much trying to create a file system directory. And you can have many folders and many files. And if you want every child, every row, right, every node to be a subscription, or do you want the parent subscription? If you make that mistake, you're going to see these the animations kind of like lag behind. Again, I wrote the code. I didn't know what the fuck was going on because the optimization was hidden behind an API. I asked fucking AI, investigated, took about 3 or 4 minutes, and it fixed it. I don't know, crazy. Again, the main theme is you have to be this high. You have to understand that state management is not fucking easy. Things you gotta think about. Redux does have foot guns. A great foot gun that I ran into was you can have a reducer listen to another reducer. So and that code can be hidden away many files deep, many folders deep. A component in the UI, you click a button, and a bunch of shit happens in the background. And when you try to trace why or how that's happening, you're going to reducers, all triggering each other in a synchronous fashion. It's great, but it's very implicit. If a bug does happen, you have to go through every single file to figure this shit out. It's a very powerful thing. Again, you got to be this high to write it. Fat thunks, errors, right? Processing in the middleware. You can't avoid the middleware. You have to be an expert in the middleware. You have to know what the middleware is. Use selector. I put it here as for chumps. At some point, you're going to keep using use selector, and you're going to hate it. And so you're going to want to rewrite the API which I did. I can show you that later in a bit to make it look a little bit more ergonomic. And again, at the end of the day, it's like I want to do it my way. I have a mental model in my head. I've been doing this for a long time. How can I do it? I wrote down a bunch of principles that I had in my head when I came into this, right? If you do adopt a state management, keep this front and center. That thing that you're using for state management is the source of truth, not the server, right? Not, well, in this respect, in the browser, right? That package or that state store is the source of truth, not the component, not the local storage, not IndexedDB, not your headers, not the URL, right? Keep it one place. In this case, Redux is the source of truth. I don't want shit in it, so I'm gonna have to validate all the data to make sure that it's clean, right? Another thing, not all state needs to be stored in Redux. Very important. You don't need to say, you don't have to save is pending, is saved, is loading, that kind of stuff, right? That stuff can belong in the components. One thing I learned from Mongo, documents are cool, documents are simple. Guess what? Documents are just JavaScript objects, right? Kind of, sort of, JSON objects. So I treat my Redux records as such as well. I borrow that model and I make sure that there's no joins or anything like that, but there is dependencies. You have to follow those rules that are associated with like a document-based database. Data is validated before storing. Another guiding principle. Favor explicit over implicit. Do not bury triggers inside reducers. Debugging is a pain. Preload data. Preload as much data as possible, especially if you're using React server components, right? You can do a lot of stuff in the back end, in the server, to help speed up rendering. Here I have organization, maintenance over. That's not best practice. And this is what you see a lot over and over again in the blog posts, is that you shouldn't be doing that. That's not best practice. No, that's not convention. Don't do that. And again, you have to be this high to write it. You have to understand what's going on and why they say it, right? You're not supposed to use asynchronous code in the reducer. Why? Right? It's a foot gun. You have to understand if you're going to use async stuff or do stuff that's beyond the convention, you have to know what you're doing. Very important thing I learned, if you do preload data on the server, make sure that you pass it directly as is expected in Redux. Don't transform it. Don't pull it from the API and then change the names. No. Have it exactly, the data pipe down the API calls look exactly as your initial data that's going to be consumed. So all you have to do is call the API and then dispatch, and you're done. There's no data manipulation. There's no data mapping. There's no changing names, stuff like that, right? It's super lean. Keeps your things very, very lean and clean. And also, very important to remember, the thunk, right, is the responsible party when it comes to UX decisions. So you hit a button, it updates something in the back end. The button doesn't determine what happens next. The asynchronous call happens in the thunks. The thunks handles the logging, handles the error calling, and also, hey, it's done loading. It was successful. Display a toast, or go to the next page, or whatever it is. But it is the results of the thunks that will determine the UX. Again, these are just principles that I adopted because if you ever work on projects and people start doing their own thing, you're going to see a lot of logic and components. You're going to see a lot of logic just spread about. But I follow these principles, and I came up with this little kind of like structure for my Redux. After migrating from the Zuslin to Redux, this structure kind of just popped out, right? Most importantly is like the record stuff, right? Records are my documents. In particular, I have a domain called data query, and inside of it, I have the context file for the AI. The index file has, here we go. The index file has the actions, the selectors, the reducers, right, in one file. The types, obviously, you want to make sure you have the types correct. The thunks all belong to the same domain, and most importantly, the validation, right? With that set in place, I can easily prompt AI now to be like, hey, create a new record for me for this type of data, blah, blah, blah. And in one shot, it does exactly what it's expected, following the styles, following my guiding principles, so on and so forth, right? At this point, I can show you some code base, how the project is structured, or I could take a few questions, and we can be on our way. Any thoughts? Either way, you guys want to see code, or I mean, it's pretty gnarly, but yeah. All right, let me. Here's some. Oops. So this thing is kind of. Oh no. 3%. Ah. Okay, so obviously the store. Oh, let me see. Can anyone see that? Is it okay? Okay, how about that? That's pretty good. Okay. Oops. Okay. So I got a record, just like the image showed. The domain is data query, right, and a bunch of stuff. So the store is where you register your Redux store. The domains are the reducers, right? The records, the objects that you want to keep. And here's the most important part of this configuration. So configure store is a RTK API that kind of squeezes 3 or 4 other APIs together that you would have to write your own. Again, reducing boilerplate. Obviously, the reducer is your objects. Preload state is the stuff that I want the application to be preloaded right before it renders to the user. And the middleware is the most confusing and I don't know, heartbreaking part of Redux is just not user friendly conceptually. But once you get it set up, everything just flows together, and you're off to the races. That's the store. Obviously, it follows context. So you have to create a provider, right? A context store, a store provider. Again, this is just stuff you can copy and paste from the online, or ask AI to do it for you. It's just everywhere. But it's the very first thing you do on the client. If you do cross the I'm not going to follow convention type of thing, right? I'm going to use my own APIs. So I rewrote the plain use dispatch, use selector to something more of my liking. I'll show you how a working example of that. But again, I wrote it, AI came in and fixed it up for me and put the right types. But Redux does provide the ability to rewrite their own APIs, right? It's just a function over a function type of thing. Anyways, it frees up a lot of the organizational issues with it in the context. My middleware is the routes error middleware, right? If you throw an error, catch it, do stuff with it. If an action is being called and there's an error, you don't want to hit that reducer. You want to bail out of that pipeline, right? And so that has to be part of the middleware because everything is a middleware. And so this is pretty fat. This is a big reducer or Redux domain, right? You have a bunch of actions associated with a particular domain. The AI will generate a bunch of the stuff. You can write it by hand. It's not difficult to do these types of things. Create action is an RTK. API, if you weren't using create action, you have to write your own function, name it, so on and so forth. Anyways, these automatically create or generate that code for you. I have a create action here because in my actions, which again, it's not, I guess you're not supposed to, or it's not recommended. I don't know what it is, but in my create actions is where I validate the data. So you call an action, a component calls an action like input a query text or query input of the name of the query. It validates to make sure that it's legit, right? Before it goes to the reducers, before it even goes down the pipeline, the action is the very first thing at the beginning of the pipeline. Right, so you got validation. The validation lives in its own file. The domain validations, I use AJV for mirrors because I like JSON schema. The AI is really good at writing JSON schema. I just tell the AI these are the conditions. It writes the JSON schema for me with the proper error messages, compile it, and just wrap it around a function, a friendly little function, and that's it. So when it comes to the when the component calls its action, the data that the payload that the component is passing into it gets validated the very, 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 very first thing. I want to stop it and error out as fast as possible, fail fast, right? Again, you read the Redux documentation, you go to Reddit, you're gonna see people saying, don't do this, don't do this, whatever, right? So that's the actions, and so all my actions had to do that, that need validation. Selectors. Selectors are the stuff that your component will subscribe to. So your component is talking about, I just did this today. Nope. Okay, so yeah. Query tree. This is the massive directory. So selector. Yeah. So here's a selector. This component subscribes to this selector, which is called select query tree, which is just the state of the tree, right? Every time the tree changes, so anytime a new file comes in, anytime the user clicks on it, just like your file directory here on the right, it closes, it highlights. When anything that changes, this automatically runs, right? That's the kind of the subscription model of Redux. And so you can write a bunch of selectors. You can be very picky about what kind of data that you want your components to respond to. And then the magic, right? The reducer, right? Create reducer is an RTK API. It reduces the amount of code that you have to write, and it just gets down to the key parts, right? Add case is where you put your action that this reducer is going to listen to, and then the logic, the pure function, how to update your state. So the action is the very beginning of the middleware. The reducer is at the very end of the middleware, and it's immutable, and it's a pure function, right? You're not going to see any asynchronous stuff code here. And all of them have the same thing. It's the same freaking pattern over and over again. So like once you establish the architecture, once you establish the code base, how you want your team to follow, it's pretty self-explanatory. The most important thing is your developers follow the guidelines, they follow the patterns. And AI is super good at following patterns. And so whenever I need to write a reducer, an action, a validator, whatever it is in my Redux, the AI will miraculously, or whatever you want to call it, especially 5.2, will wire it up in such a way that it's always looking like the architecture of the project already. So when I migrated from Zisland to Redux, Took me a while to figure out the patterns I want to establish. Once I did, AI came in and just started knocking things out nonstop. As long as you wrap it or you put in my case, I just put a context into it. AI, I have AI write notes. So when I come back into it, I can read it and understand, like, okay, the AI is not hallucinating, it's not making shit up. I can grok it, I can understand what's going on, I know how to save, I know tabs, right? Very high level context that AI will also use when generating code. And so all my records have such a context to give it an idea of like what this record does and why it exists, so on and so forth. Anyway, this is kind of like a quick overview of like this. Once you have established Redux architecture, AI is really good trained at it. I guess nowadays, the models are really fucking good. But it is, you have to be this high to ride. Yeah, and that's it. That's it. Any questions? Any comments? Yeah.
So what was actually the recommended way to put the validation within the middleware?
So you can't, it always has to be in the middleware. Well, that's not true. If you want to put the validation, you can do the validation at the component level. Okay, so if I show you the query tree component, I have the tree body. Section header, here we go. Section header has a toolbar. And so the toolbar has, let me close it off. Here's the app. The toolbar has, you see that you hover it, you see these functions here. Now in the toolbar, you can write the validation here inside the function. I particularly made this component a presentation component. No logic is inside of it. You could write it. You can write the validation in here. So when a user clicks on to create a function or to create a new file and they type the name in and they click enter, you can validate inside this component that the name follows a particular, it can't be more than like 12 characters long or something like that, right? Whatever it is. You can do it in the component. I didn't want to do that in the component. I want the component to be stupid. I just want the components to accept data and push the logic to somewhere else. In this case, it's in the action. But you can write the validation in your component. If you write the validation in the action, which is Redux, everything goes to middleware. So action technically is middleware. It's just the very beginning of the middleware. So my recommendation, the way I do it is, yeah, I'm going to use in the action because I don't want my components to have logic whatsoever. No business logic, none of that logic ever. It just makes it easier for reducing or for reusing the component styles and stuff like that. Is it, I don't know, legit? Is it official? Is it something you find in the component? I don't know. This is the way I do it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it makes sense to have the validation closer to the entities or the records itself. Like
In database, yeah.
Rather than just random places.
Right, right. Anything else? Cool, let's go downstairs. Thanks for everybody.
If you need a parking pass, please let me know. Yeah, when you go.